I've been heading down a long rabbit hole into the theology behind the Mormon Church, and specifically behind the idea of plural marriage within that church. We all know the mainstream church doesn't participate in plural marriage, but there are some fringe groups who do, and the Brown family featured on the TLC show Sister Wives belongs to one of those groups. I've been watching Christine Brown as she navigates leaving her polygamous marriage and how everyone in the family has been responding to all of that on social media. I do always wonder how much of everything presented on the show is real, but I have a tendency to believe Sister Wives is more real than a lot of other shows because of all the blind items I've seen about it and how it matches up with the show. So, randomly, I got a really interesting chance to chat with a woman that I met through a Reddit Mormon polygamy group. This woman left polygamy in the early 2000s, and she shared some really revealing information about how Kody Brown actually chose his wife. Her time in polygamy, she experienced her own polygamous marriage, which ended up falling apart rather quickly, as well as a second marriage to her sister's husband. She knows Christine's family because it turns out Christine comes from a very well-known and prominent Mormon polygamist family. She doesn't know Kody personally, but she talked to me about some of the rumors that swirl around in the community about the family. So most recently, on Sister Wives, Kody has been making some really weird negative statements about Christine as they start to uncouple. He's been putting her down and revealing that he had doubts about her from the beginning of their relationship. Specifically, he states he didn't feel attracted to her in many ways and cites this really weird story about a road trip he took with her while they were engaged and how she bought a carton of chili cheese fries and ate it in front of him. He claims this utterly disgusted him and he couldn't get it out of his mind in the following months for the remainder of the courtship, the marriage, and their early lives together. So let me read to you about the latest episode of Sister Wives, which happened, I believe, last week, to give you a better understanding of what's going on with them. In the shocking Sister Wives Season 17 premiere, Kody Brown dropped a massive bombshell on Christine Brown. Kody shocked audiences when he admitted that he was never, quote-unquote, attracted to Christine, even when he married her. He tells her that he basically felt pressured into the marriage and just went along with it. In the jaw-dropping September 11th episode of Sister Wives, Kody opens up about marrying Christine. He tells her that getting married to her was more out of obligation than love. He said, "It's true, we married under circumstances that were not romantic." Christine disagrees. "They were for me. They weren't for you. It was romantic for me." Kody tells her that he didn't know better. She inquires, "And had you known better, you wouldn't have married me?" Christine asks. Kody then tries to smooth it over by calling their marriage, quote-unquote, destiny. Later in the conversation, Kody admits that he had little attraction towards Christine when they got married. He said, "Okay, so we can unravel this further because it's true that I wasn't attracted to you when we got married." Kody states, "I felt pressured into the marriage and I didn't know better at the time." A dumbfounded Christine reacts to Kody's admission with nervous laughter. She tells the camera, "Oh my gosh, really? He didn't know better? So, did he marry me out of obligation? You know, our church doesn't have the whole arranged marriage thing, but it sounds to me like he had to marry me," Christine said to the cameras. "That's so sad," the mother of 6 concludes. Kody has told Christine that he isn't attracted to her many times in the past. In the family's memoir, Becoming Sister Wives, The Story of an Unconventional Marriage, Kody spoke negatively about his courtship with Christine, and he wrote, "When we set out on our road trip," this was a road trip that they took while they were engaged, "I was convinced that Christine was the cutest girl in the world, although she was a little chubby. Back then, I was young and superficial enough to care about physical appearances. After we'd been on the road all night, we stopped at a gas station. I'd been drinking soda pop to stay awake, and my stomach felt sour and upset. Just thinking about food made me really queasy. Christine went into the Quickie Mart and bought herself what seemed like the largest portion of chili cheese nachos that I'd ever seen. The sight of those nachos turned my stomach. I couldn't watch her eat them. She must have been starving because she was eating so quickly, and there was chili sauce and nacho cheese everywhere. Looking back, I hate myself for the thoughts I had at that moment, but the sight of this chubby girl in my car devouring chili cheese nachos for breakfast put the brakes on our relationship. It brought out the most superficial and shallowest side of me. I liked her. In fact, I liked her very much, but the nacho experience cooled my attraction a little. Well, actually a lot. But despite this, Kody and Christine married in a quick wedding ceremony. However, it lacked romance and even a honeymoon. When the memoir came out, the Sister Wives tell-all host asked the family about the nacho incident in the finale episode. Kody admitted, "I will be honest, I was not attracted to Christine in any kind of physical sense." When the host clarified, "So you were not physically attracted to Christine?" Kody replied, "That's an understatement." The host asked, "Were you grossed out by her?" And Kody says, "I won't say that, but the nachos grossed me out enough to make me go, okay, I'm waiting to marry her." Christine said, "It hurts to hear him say that. It's horrible," she said. All right, so all of this information is so crazy to me. Like, why would you be with someone that you felt utterly disgusted by? And why would you feel okay to announce to the world in a memoir and on national TV that you were disgusted by her when you got married? You already had 2 other wives and 2 other families, so what was the motivation to marry Christine? Why go down this road with her? Let me start by introducing you to the information I gained from chatting with another ex-Mormon wife.
Little Sister Wives update. Christine has released a statement and Kody's making cameos. Let's watch. Yes. It's really bad.
Once you make the decision to get a divorce and leave, that's so difficult coming to that decision. And then you make the decision, but then you still have the rest of your life with these wonderful people that you've been living with for 26 years, and you still are part of the family, and and navigating all of that is also difficult. Like, it's really hard to know what to do all the time and what to say all the time. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Gave me some guidance. People are so silly. They're like, glad you left him and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, gosh, that's not the direction that I'm going here at all. There's like no anger or anything like that. There was sadness for
So, formal apologies. Sorry. I never know what to do with divorced people, and I always say congratulations because that's the emotion that I felt, but you know what? That's not always appropriate, so sorry about that. Now, you get to see a real-life narcissist breakdown. And there's a cat, right? A cat. But the video that Christine made was very, very tactful. It was very well-spoken. Anything that she talked about, she never bashed, she never shamed. There was no passive aggression. Now, tell me if this behavior looks familiar.
Just saying hi. I guess you guys are best friends, and that's awesome. It's awesome to have a best friend. Probably call each other every day, share things with each other, everything that's happening, all the gossip, and every thought that you've got. That's something great to have, validation from a best friend. I've got some friends, love having friends, close friends. I like doing that with wives too. Just having closeness with my wives, that kind of back and forth, that whole sharing thing, it's kind of special. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a great day. A lot of peace and love from me and the Sister Wives.
If you have ever dealt with a narcissist who is losing control and somebody has left them, you've seen that behavior. I know that Christine's sad and I hope that she feels better, but I'm so glad that she's out. His response was so passive aggressive, so narcissistic. And then that is the narcissist's MO. They say all kinds of negative shit. And then at the end, they're like, peace, man. You don't want peace. You just talked all kinds of shit while she's over here being very kind about this stuff when I bet she knows a lot about you that she could tell. So, snaps for Christine, and way to go, Kody, for exposing yourself so the rest of us didn't have to take as much time. We appreciate you.
Okay, so basically during our conversation, this wife made 5 things clear to me about Mormon polygamous marriages. 1. Usually an elder is the one who makes final decisions about who will get married and actually pairs people up together. There's very little courting for Mormon polygamists. The idea is you're supposed to get your own personal revelation about whom you're meant to be with. Since that comes directly from God, dating is really forbidden. In practice, though, the revelation is subject to approval by someone higher up on the totem pole within your community. That means that in reality, what matters the most is who the community leader wants you to marry. And there could be many different reasons and motivations behind who that person ultimately picks for you. Number 2, all of these groups have backstories that are often much like the Game of Thrones. According to the ex-wife I spoke to, all of these splinter Mormon polygamous groups are formed around prominent families in a very Game of Thronesian manner. For instance, the Kingston group, they're up in Canada, I believe, is known for intermarrying, including marrying brothers and sisters to each other. The LeBaron family is notorious for putting hits out on people. Some of the LeBaron members, in fact, murdered the head of one of the largest fundamentalist polygamous churches, a guy named Rulon Alred. A man named Jared Peterson Sr. ended up claiming Alred's spirit and have-nots, the rich and the poor families, those with power and those without, and marriages follow along these lines. Number 3. Marriages are like currency in Mormon polygamy. A Mormon polygamous marriage can mean a step up in the world for one of the parties, a gain in power or money, an upwards or downwards movement in your place in the church, or maybe even a favor for a friend. For example, many Mormons who practice polygamy believe in taking on a marriage for the express purpose of quote-unquote helping the parties and families involved deal with a female who loses a mate, either from death, divorce, or other circumstances. We can see this in how Kody wound up with Robin. You see, Robin was originally married off to a man from a very prominent and well-respected Mormon family. She was a prize, but so was her first husband in the eyes of Mormonism. Whatever happened, many say Robin's husband was abusive. Robin got divorced. In the eyes of her community, she needed another man to rescue her, take care of her children, make her legitimate again. But she was also quote-unquote used goods, according to this theology. And that's why someone like Kody, who didn't come from a super prominent family or have a lot of money at the time, was even considered as a match for her. It's similar in what happened with Christine. Christine was like a prize for Kody at the time that they got married. She came from a good and worthy family, but she also wasn't the firstborn child of the first wife or anything like that. She needed a husband, and she needed to be matched with someone who fit into her supposed worth in the Mormon polygamous marriage market. She wanted to be a third wife, and Kody and his family fit her mold, and she fit into theirs. Marriages are currency for the family, and it reminds me of that old Showtime tune, Matchmaker, Matchmaker, Make Me a Match. Number 4. Wives and husbands must barter and trade to make the final decision on who they will accept into their family. The woman I spoke with says there's a lot of negotiating that swirls around in families when they're wanting to take on a new wife. Kody would not be able to just pick a wife that he wanted and roll with it. First, the community elders would need to agree on the match. And they're not the only ones. Kody's first and second wife must also be willing to accept the new family member. It's unlikely that Kody would just be allowed to have whatever wife suited his fancy. Let's be honest. Mary especially probably needed to be appeased and happy enough with his choice. It also seemed like Kody was in need of someone to take on the role of the stay-at-home mom, because Mary and Janelle needed to work outside of the home to help bring money in for the family. Hence, there were many requirements and needs to be met outside of what just Kody wanted when it was time to take on a third wife. Then, number 5. Wives and women in these communities move up and down in importance based upon their promise of fertility. Older wives or wives that have trouble conceiving will lose importance in the family and community structures as they age or mature. For example, We saw how Mary, as a first wife, had a certain amount of power within the Brown family. But the woman I spoke to argued that a wife like Janelle would ultimately gain a lot of power and favor in the family for the following reasons. 1, she carried a lot of children for Kody, and 2, she carried Kody's firstborn son. And then on top of that, she carried multiple sons for Kody. Though Christine also carried multiple children, they were mostly girls. She only had one son. An argument can be made that Janelle was the fertility winner among the original wives. Now, Robin is the only wife who seemingly remains fertile, and she has managed to give Kody at least one son so far. So the worth and the importance of the wives goes up and down, waxes and wanes over time. So, how did Kody and Christine really come together? This community member alleges that it's likely Christine's father and family ultimately set up this match. Kody would have been expected to see it as a prize, given Christine's prominence in the community. It's likely he didn't know her all that well, and his wives were just willing to accept her. They probably saw her as someone they wouldn't be too jealous of, but could also help out significantly with the care of the home and the kids. Kody thought, well, okay, this moves me up the Mormon polygamy ladder, and yes, ultimately, as he's admitted, he felt it was his duty. Even if he was already overwhelmed, tired, and struggling financially, and ultimately, as he claims, he wasn't attracted to Christine, or he wasn't as interested in her as maybe he had been in other wives, or especially in Robin, now that she's come along. Poor Christine. A lot of things make me sad here. Christine is awesome. Of course, I don't buy into any of this crap about who was worthy and who was beautiful and who means the most, who had the best fertility, because Christine is wonderful. She's gorgeous, funny, well-spoken. She seems to be a good mom on the show. To me, it seems like she brought so much positivity to the home and to the kids. Many of the kids have stated that they felt a special closeness to Christine because she was a stay-at-home mom. Christine always struck me as being a great wife and a good sister wife, for what it's worth, to the other women. I felt she was more open and honest and willing to be real about what was going on in that family. I think for her to even be willing to leave now and speak out about everything that's happened is pretty awesome in many ways in a community where everything is kept so hush-hush. And she's choosing not to live like Mary in a relationship where there doesn't seem to be any real connection or time spent together. That's not what she wants for her life or for her kids. When I watched the past couple seasons, I was especially shocked when Christine's daughter had to go and have her scoliosis surgery. I remember several seasons back, Isabel started some kind of therapy to try to correct her scoliosis, and eventually she wasn't able to keep up with it, and it wasn't really working for her. She had a pretty severe curvature of her spine. And I know personally that scoliosis surgery is incredibly painful and difficult to get through, and the pain lasts for a long time afterwards. There's a lot of physical therapy to be done. Sometimes surgeries have to be done in multiple phases. If there's any type of surgery where I feel like a child most needs their parent, I would feel like this would be one of the top surgeries where, they're coming out in a lot of pain, and it's going to take a lot of time for them to get back to being pain-free. I found it utterly disgusting to see that Kody chose not to go to Isabel's surgery and not to be around much before and after it because of this whole crazy notion that he didn't want to get COVID. What about your children? What about your child Isabel getting COVID while she's at the hospital going through surgery? You need to be there with her. Your number one concern should have been her. I was completely disgusted by the way he reacted to that. And he's reacted as well in a similar way to Janelle's kids. I think a couple of her sons have been coming and staying with her, and Kody really acted poorly about that, kind of making
Harrison calls me up with his narcissistic attitude and goes, "This is your fault, and I'm never going to be around you again."
If y'all would excuse me for a second, I see a pot and a kettle over there that I have not met, and that concerns me.
he's telling his dad, I'm done. I'm done with you. Because I don't like how I think my mom is being treated, how we're being treated at this house. Janelle's kids have been frustrated with him for years because of the way that he's treated Janelle for years. Janelle's fine with her relationship with Kody. She said that it's everything she needs it to be. Everything she needs it to be. Over and over and over, she says that.
I don't speculate on certain things, but over the years, what we've seen with Janelle and Kody, they have a situation that would almost make me feel like Janelle is more on the ace spectrum, but it seems like the kids are having a really hard time with how much he's not been around, and I literally just posted a video last night about him not being there when she had COVID and that sort of thing. So what else was said, and are you about to have a full belly laugh? You certainly are.
Just called Janelle and said, I need Gabriel and I need Garrison to both move out.
This is the most hilarious thing to me. He's threatened this before. I'm like, dude, you're not even on the lease. I'm on the lease.
I got really excited there, but full disclosure, it's just because...
We're just wishing I could do the job for you, sir. I'd give her a ha and a hi-ya and then a woo and I'd kick her, sir.
But see, the Teflon Queen is not that you don't want to mess with that because you're just going to... What he said by Teflon Queen, he meant everything slides off of her. But even then, he kind of should have taken his own advice because if you come at her, you're just going to... right at, like, you know when you step in the bathtub, it does have a skeeshy thing? I wouldn't do it.
This is like they're blaming me for having rules about COVID. This is like literally the backfiring of all my COVID rules right in my face.
Look, here comes a consequences of my actions chasing me right now.
But like the next question sliced and took cake. What?
My boys, there's so much more going on than just this fight over whether whose COVID rules should be followed, Kody's or the CDC, or if they're doing the right thing.
The question is, should they follow Kody or the CDC?
Is that a real question? Of course. I mean, what you want me to say to that? Of course I did.
Now, I'm no CDC cheerleader, but still more credible than Kody Brown. And that actually said, that's a statement, actually.
Like, they're very frustrated. They feel like there's been a real preference for Robin.
In case it's not clear, Kody made up his own rules and Robin's the only one following them.
Kody and I have a good relationship. Like, it's struggling, but like I know what I need from Kody and I communicate that to him and he does a pretty good job meeting it. What I have now is adequate. It works for me.
You deserve more than adequate. Everyone does. But now on the no contact list with Dad, we've got Leon, Gabe, Garrison, Gwen, and probably more that aren't confirmed yet.
It all about him, saying that, your children, you need to get your sons out of the house. They're old enough to live by themselves. I'm 100% team Janelle and Christine. My kids come first, and I don't want to be with a man who doesn't put his kids first. So I'm not sure, what that situation is. Of course, everybody says that you need to put your marriage before the kids because the kids eventually move out. But I mean, a lot of that is a little bit of, that works out differently for everyone, right? Like, of course, in some ways you have to put your spouse first, but when it comes to the actual health and well-being of your children, that should always come first. And I can't believe that Kody was such an ass. I mainly can't believe that people like Robin, Janelle, Mary, all of them should have said, if you do not go to surgery with Isabel, we will lose all respect for you. I hope they should have been telling him that. Like, this is our child that we're raising together as a family. How dare you even have in your mind that you're not going to go with her to be with her for this surgery? That's just unacceptable for all of the wives and all of the children, not just for Christine. You need to be there for Isabel. So I'm pretty... I was pretty taken aback that happened. I was shocked to then find out that Christine was going to leave him and really happy for her. She's doing like her little cooking show online now. I'm watching it, any chance I can. I'm definitely giving her the views because I want it to do well, and I think she is cute and fun to listen to. So I found it really interesting to speak to this woman within the righteous branch of the FLDS. And, I, of course, like, as I said before, I'm only saying that this is allegedly how things happened between Christine and Kody. I think it does give kind of a outlook I hadn't thought of before, where a lot of this is very arranged. It's not necessarily based on love. and compatibility. There are reasons why people are put together within the church. And that makes sense to me because I always felt like Kody did not seem that happy with Mary. And then there was a lot of anger between several of the wives not liking each other, even before Robin came along. And I thought to myself, like, how did these people wind up with each other? Because independently, I actually think that all of them are okay, fine people. But as a group, as a team that was brought together, I think to myself, like, how were they drawn to one another? It makes a lot more sense to me if they were chosen arbitrarily by people in the community and put together. They may have felt like they didn't really have a choice in many ways. So I'm glad I was able to take some time to share all of this with you. I will continue to follow up on what's going on with Christine and the Brown family. I'm off to bed now, but I hope you guys take some time to head down your own rabbit hole. Have a great night.